what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk to you guys a bit about the speculated release date of patch 9.1 and really just the systems and current, I guess, events that are going on in 9.0.5, and really just how I feel Shadowlands currently is at this point in time. Now, over the past couple weeks, there really has been a lot talking about 9.1 coming out in August and even September, I've heard at this point. And I do think that a lot of it is sort of baseless speculation outside of the information we got from Towley talking about a June release being optimistic. I think that's fair, but I want to get into that and really just talk about the current state of Shadowlands and just how I feel everything is, and hopefully what we're going to see coming up over the next few weeks, months, and I guess the projected estimated slate of 9.1. Don't forget, this BlizzCon coming up this year, well, hopefully this year, potentially, probably not at this point, in October, it's supposed to be an expansion BlizzCon. We're still in 9.0. Let's get into this. Now, going into Shadowlands' actual launch, there was an incredible amount of hype behind things. Blizzard mentioned that even though COVID became a thing in 2020 and progressing throughout the year, that they weren't really behind release date-wise for Shadowlands' actual launch. Over the course of alpha and beta, it did sort of seem like things were maybe a little bit behind schedule, but it wasn't too bad to the point where things couldn't be corrected by then. However, the closer we got to the actual release date, Blizzard did indeed clarify that they needed more time. They simply weren't ready for Shadowlands to release. And listen, I'm in the camp personally of, if the game is not ready, I'd much rather them take the time to fix it and release a polished version of the game. And if you played or watched stream over the course of the last half of beta, you could tell that when the initial release date was pushed or mentioned, the game wasn't ready. When we had 2 weeks until the first launch date, the game was nowhere near ready. They were still testing raid bosses up to the week of release. Council of Blood was tested 2 more times after they pushed back. Class tuning was nowhere where it needed to be. But thankfully, Blizzard took the time and said, hey, we have to push back. This is the best option we have for Shadowlands. And they did, and we had I would say overall a pretty successful release of Shadowlands in patch 9.0. Now, spending a year in Nilotha farming bosses, we raided for roughly 2 hours a week towards the, I guess, the last 6 months of 8.3, 8.4, whatever patch it was, the Nilotha patch. I think a lot of that, a long farm tier, whether it's HFC, whether it's Nilotha, leads to complacency. You know, if you're sitting in a tier for 6, 7, 8 months, raiding for 2 hours a night, all week, you get used to being able to just sort of raid log at a certain point. Now, corruption was around, and that kept things pretty interesting. And Mythic Plus has also been around for a while, which also keeps players engaged in content outside of raiding, which I really personally enjoy. But I think we've seen a lot of burnout in Shadowlands so far, and I think a lot of that is actually due to spending a lot of time in Nilotha, and then the system shifting from one, I guess, version to the other going into Shadowlands. In BFA, you had a very similar system to what you had in Legion, where artifact power mattered. You're filling in your Heart of Azeroth. In Legion, you had the same thing, working on your artifact weapon, artifact. You were gaining like incremental little power levels towards your overall player DPS, character, I guess, power level every single day. But you had this weird shift in Shadowlands to, you can gain this power, but it's not artifact power, it's anima. And at a certain point, the anima, it's relevant if you're looking at sanctum upgrades. It's relevant if you're doing certain things, but it's not artifact power. You're not really gaining that overall like individual character progression every single day. Cowley mentioned it in his video. He said, I love logging on every single day, doing world quests and gaining a tiny little bit of AP, because in 3 days I'll hit another level on my neck or on my weapon, and I'll be that much stronger. I agree. That's what I really liked about Legion and BFA. But we went into actual Shadowlands, and world quests are much more complicated, much longer. They're a huge pain comparatively to Legion and BFA, their counterparts, and they're just less rewarding. You go and spend 20 minutes doing this quest, or I guess let's be real here, 10, and get a random epic that's 30, 40 eye levels lower than what you get out of heroic. You get 80 gold, you get 70 anima. By the way, somebody ran the math on the anima. It takes 3.5 years, 3.5 or 5.5 years of grinding every single anima source every single week to get every reward in game. That sounds a little off. Anima is pretty scarce. Even after the changes to Mythic Plus dropping in the end, and Castle Nathir dropping more anima, I think that needs to be looked at. But world quests just don't really feel very rewarding. Then you had Mythic Plus dropping less loot. You had less eye levels in Mythic Plus, making it even less rewarding. And that versus Conquest giving an insane amount of gear early on, giving you the option of pushing your gear to 230, or I believe like week 2 or so, if you're able to obtain 2100, which to be fair is a very hard rank to obtain. But nonetheless, PvE was just sort of left feeling like you really didn't have much at all outside of Nathria. And Nathria opens a few weeks later. You're getting 2-3 items per boss drop. You go a whole raid without any loot dropping. It just didn't really feel very rewarding. It sort of makes you just want to raid log, but not in a good way, in a bad way. I've enjoyed being able to raid log over the last few weeks or so, because I'm at that point where, barring getting a belt from Zymox and like a trinket from Theater of Pain, I'm bisgeared, but I have the option to log on and play and do rogue quests, the Maw or whatever. That's fine. But it just felt like I'm not engaged in the actual game anymore. Then they increased the loot drops. They brought the Valor system out in 9.0.5, but I feel like that's just way too late. Patch 9.0 was over at that point. Valor is completely irrelevant unless you're gearing alts up. And having the actual achievement be account-wide, I think, is a good step, for sure. This is a great time to gear alts. But as far as my main character goes, I don't really feel inclined to play him a tremendous amount, or at least anywhere near the amount that I felt I wanted to play him in, like, Nilotha. Mid-Nilotha patch. Late, I guess, Ashara patch, whatever that was. It just feels really awkward, and the game just doesn't really feel as rewarding. And once again, coming out of Nathria, being in that year of farm, raiding 2-3 hours a week, into an expansion drop. You always see burnout when an expansion drops, every single time. Whether it's you or a player you played with for a while, people get complacent. And spending a year in a final tier, which is typically how WoW goes, let's be real here, it just is. You come out of being able to raid log, play 2-3 hours a week, into expansion drops. And an expansion drop is much more demanding than a new patch coming out, because you're leveling, which was pretty fast this time around, but you're leveling. You're gearing your character up from a much lower eye level. You're heading into a raid at a much lower eye level. When it comes to Nathria when it comes from 9.0, Nathria going into whatever raid we get in 9.1, you're able to carry over that mythic Nathria gear into the next raid. So depending on tuning and things, typically you're a little bit more stronger heading into that next raid. But that wasn't the case at all when Shadowlands dropped, because gear wasn't as rewarding, or there wasn't dropping as much. Eye level was much lower. Valor wasn't around. There was a large step up in difficulty. Nathria was also a 10 boss raid. We haven't seen a 10 boss initial raid in a really long time. I don't think it's ever been, it hasn't been since like Karazhan or like BC Wrath era. You can sort of say Cataclysm with all 3 tiers or raids dropping at once, but I don't think it's really the same thing. Like, raiding has evolved a lot since then too. Plus you had bosses like SLG, which is a complete nightmare still, even to this very day. Nathria took about a month longer, I believe, looking at the previous first tiers my guild is cleared, for the first raid of expansion. So I think all of that coming out of Nathria, just the rush to level gearing, coming out of Nilotha, I'm sorry, the rush to gearing, getting into Nathria, spending more time in there, having an SLG kind of fight, which is probably going to go down as the worst fight in Mythic ratings history, really wore out a lot of players. And now people are looking at 9.1. When is 9.1 PTR going to hit? And we found out we got a 9.0.5 patch instead, which is cool because they mentioned they're going to be doing some legendary tuning, and they're going to be some class tuning, and maybe some conduit tuning, and there's going to be a new Valor system, which is great. It's awesome. But that really didn't bring a whole lot with it outside of Valor. Yes, some legendaries were retuned, but they haven't addressed the Soul Ash issue at all. We found out this week that they're going to be uncapping Soul Ash, but the problem, it's like having a flat tire and somebody comes to change your oil. It doesn't do anything. Like it doesn't make any sense. The Soul Ash cap, I believe, was 8,500 before. You can get roughly 1,150, 1,200 a week by doing both wings of Torghast. But there's no way to farm Soul Ash besides that, unless you get the actual mission table event once or twice a week. You're bringing in 1,500 like roughly a week. You're not hitting that cap for a month and a half. The cap wasn't the issue. The issue is that people, number one, want to play alts now, but can't really do it with legendary wines because they don't have any Soul Ash. Number two, we're going to be in 9.0 at this point. It's March 30th. We're going to be in 9.0 for probably at least 3 more months, and 2.5 bare minimum, probably 3 more months as far as retail is concerned. And people want to start playing with different legendaries. I know personally I'd like to play with Double Chaos Bolt. I'd like to play with Implosion legendary. I wouldn't mind making Malefic Wrath. I've made Wrath of Consumption. I made the Dog one. I've made a couple of them that are sort of like off kilter, off the beaten path legendaries that have actually performed pretty well. But I don't really want to make any more, or I can't make any more because the Soul Ash requirement hasn't been fixed. And number two, Blizzard's response was for alts, well, you can still go into actual Torghast because it's account wide now. You have layer 7, 8 open on alts. Sure, but you're still crafting a rank 1 legendary. If you're trying to make one on your main, that feels miserable. At this point, I would assume if you're clearing heroic and getting into mythic a little bit, you're probably like 220-ish eye level, give or take. That's not everyone. Don't burn me at the stake. I'm just saying what I'm getting at is making a 190 legendary, unless the effect is so incredibly powerful or game breaking, it feels really bad. And that's also a week's worth of Soul Ash. A 205 or 210 or whatever is 2 weeks. 225 is 3 weeks. It takes a month roughly to make a 235 legendary. A month for a max level legendary, being 4 months into the expansion. So removing the actual Soul Ash cap didn't really do much. If anything, it made things worse, because number one, we don't know what's happening with Soul Ash now. We have no idea in 9.1 if Soul Ash is going to be the currency of choice for legendaries. Removing the cap sort of makes me think that it's not going to be, but the thing is, you can't, if you're looking at rating a decent level, if you're in a high-end guild like Limit, Echo, Method, Fetchmark, yes, Pieces, whatever guild out there, you can't spend Soul Ash right now because we have no idea when 9.1 PTR is going to hit. We have no idea if there's new legendaries in the first place, what the tune is going to be like. You can't spend Soul Ash at all right now. You can't spend 1 Soul Ash because if it is the currency in 9.1 and there's more ranks legendaries coming out, which is probably going to be, you're going to have, I would assume, have to upgrade your rank 4s to rank 5s, rank 6. You're going to want every single little bit of Soul Ash you can possibly get. But if Blizzard says in a month and a half, 2 months, hey, the Soul Ash is being reset in 2 weeks when the patch comes out, we wasted 2 months sitting here on our hands doing nothing, playing a game that's a bit stale at this point because Blizzard didn't clarify. They uncapped it and didn't say anything. So the actual uncapping doesn't really do anything but hurt the player base more on like the higher end, I feel, at this point. Because to be fair, I think the people who are playing the game right now are probably more so like in the mid-tier, higher level range. I know there are casual players playing, and even like not even just casual, there are plenty of people playing, but there's still a lot to do right now in 9.0.5. There's still sockets to get on legendaries. If you want to grind conduits, I mean, technically that's a thing too, but having sockets and legendaries and getting all that out of the way going into 9.1 is actually going to be huge. My plan was to craft legendaries at rank 1 if they had, I felt like, any merit heading into 9.1, any potential merit, buffs, nerfs, whatever, and put sockets on them. I'll spend my time in the mall right now grinding sockets, because if you go from a rank 1 to a rank 2, rank 3, rank 4, if that rank 1 had a socket on it, it'll carry over to rank 2, rank 3, rank 4. But now at this point, I can't make it legendaries because Blizzard hasn't clarified what's going on with Soul Ash. They haven't decreased the actual amount of Soul Ash things require. It's basically the, like, I'm happy that their attention's at least on Soul Ash a bit, but it's probably the worst change they could have made because now we can't make anything and the actual currency is still as high as it was before. What I'm really hoping is there's some sort of Soul Ash catch-up put in game, even if it's just for alts. If it's for your main at this point, I mean, I don't really know how they do it, but listen, I don't like doing Torghast either very much, but I've done it every single week. I don't want to fall behind on Soul Ash. And at this point, if you had been doing it for a while and removed the cap, you could be sitting on a pretty good bit. But I think there needs to be some clarification, number one, on if Soul Ash is going to be the currency heading in the next patch. I really don't think it's going to be, but without that clarification, without them saying similar to Resident, hey, we're resetting, without them saying, hey, Valor, yeah, it's going away, we're resetting next patch, without any clarification, if you're looking at rating at a decent level, you can't make a legendary now. I want to upgrade Wrath Consumption to rank 4, can't do it. Want to make double Chaos Wolf, can't do it. I have to sit on my hands. I do Torghast every single week and sit on my hands. I can't do anything about it. Number two, I really hope they reduce the actual Soul Ash requirement for making legendaries. I would like to level some alts here. I'm working on my Shadow Priest, working on my DK a little bit. But when it comes to making legendaries, when they hit 60, I want to be able to play them. You know, I want to go look what legendary is best for this, and I want to go make it. I don't want to be able to make it at 190. That's miserable. Like that 190 legendaries were things that you made in December and January. We're in April at this point, and we're going to be in this patch till July, June, July, most likely, looking at how things go. We'll get to that in a little bit. I don't want to be making a 190 legendary for a week, 2 weeks, 2 months from now. I think they need to decrease the amount of Soul Ash required and also increase the actual amount you can get per week. Now, whether they increase it in Torghast, I think that's probably the best idea. Just double the amount dropping in Torghast at this point. It would be good catch-up for alts, and honestly, if you're behind your main, it would give you a bit of Soul Ash to play with. Once again, until they actually clarify what's going on with Soul Ash being the crafting reagent in 9.1, there's not honestly really a whole lot we can do about it. The biggest thing is they need to do is clarify what's going on with legendary crafting heading into next patch. Now, also on top of all that, we reference it at the beginning of the video. There's been a lot of talk about 9.1 coming out in like August. I've even heard September today. I got a DM saying, hey, is 9.1 really releasing in September? I have literally no idea, but I highly doubt it. From what I've seen and everything that I've looked at, the June being optimistic release date was based off of what Towley heard from a developer, which he spoke to a few weeks ago. Now, Towley has been right in the past when it comes to a lot of these things, and I would assume that that's pretty accurate for the most part, but I've already seen articles with this wording being misconstrued saying that June is too optimistic. Too optimistic implies it's not going to happen. Optimistic means it might be able to happen. Everything's being misconstrued at this point. Now, do I expect a patch in June? No, probably not at this point. We haven't heard anything about 9.1 PTR, nothing of the sort. I would assume there's a small chance of a late June release, but we need to get PTR like now, if that's the case, because we're going into April. And looking back to BlizzCon, there really wasn't a whole lot of mention about anything. We know it's a 10 boss raid. We know Sylvanas is in there. We know the Terragru's in there, and we know the Eye of the Jailer or whatever's in there, that's going to be an interesting fight in itself. But there wasn't really much. There was no concept art. There was nothing, you know. BlizzCon was cool, and virtual BlizzCon was awesome. It exceeded expectations, I think, for the most part, as far as the presentation went. But when it was over, I was left wanting a bit more. There was no concept art. There wasn't really anything about the raid. I don't think we even know the name of the raid, right? There was no real concept art of the zone in the Maw. Blizzard mentioned that you can mount in the Maw in 9.1, but they didn't say when. There's like, yeah, this is gonna be cool. Anyways, moving on, Hearthstone. There's not much we have to go off of for 9.1 at this point. Now, if we did indeed get PTR next week, let's say like the 5th of April or so. August looks excessive. Let's say the 5th of April or so. We know there's 10 bosses in the raid, unless things change. So that's 10 heroic bosses, 9 mythic bosses they're probably gonna have to test. Plus you can throw in 4 to 5 more for retesting. They tested Council of Blood 6 times, I believe, in Nathria. SLG a few times. So you can say roughly 25 bosses, give or take a bit in the raid, that they're going to test on heroic and mythic combined. Now, typically they test 2 bosses per day, and they have 2 testing sessions per week, being Wednesday and Thursday for raid testing. I would not expect raid testing to start the first week of PTR, whether it drops tomorrow or a month from now. But probably the week after, I'd assume. They have done triple boss testing in the past before, but that's normally when they only have 3 bosses to test and want to do it all in one day and not have 2 days of like, here's 2 bosses and here's 1 random boss the next day. It just sort of makes sense. Could they squeeze 25 bosses in a month? Probably, if they did 3 a day and 2 raid testing sessions per week, but that's excessive. So if you're looking at 25 bosses roughly, that's 4 bosses a week. You're looking at about 4, 8, 12. You're looking at about 6.5, 7 weeks of raid testing, which if the patch hits or if PTR hits mid-April, you're looking at the rest of April, you're looking at all of May, and you're probably looking at mid-June for that raid testing to end. They were testing bosses in Castle Nathria the week leading up to launch, and they've done it in the past as well. So that sort of puts us, I would assume, mid-June at the absolute earliest. And if you remember back to Nilotha testing, there was a handful of testing sessions they had to cancel because bosses weren't working. It is what it is. It's PTR. But there's going to be a new zone, a new raid, a lot of new systems coming out. I would assume expansions upon legendaries, conduits, covenants, new soul wines. I would assume new potency conduits, a lot of things coming down the line that also need testing. So do I think August or September I think it's too far, but I think that's excessive. But do I think June as a release date is a bit earlier optimistic? Yeah. Looking at how things are probably going to have to be slated, I think, yeah, it might be a bit early. I would expect, at this point, I'm tentatively expecting like a late June or July release. I think early July is probably realistic, with the raid coming out 2 to 3 weeks later. Now, I have no idea what's going on game release-wise outside of Blizzard at that point. I think there's something coming out like in July. I also think people put a lot more baseless speculation into Blizzard as to release around this game coming out to drive people to WoW instead. I think they release when they need to release, and that's pretty much it. But looking at how it is, I think July is probably a realistic timeline for 9.1 to hit. And then you have a couple weeks of the raid opens, heroic opens, mythic opens, and you're looking at August for the raid. But I wouldn't be that surprised if things do get pushed back to August patch wise. One thing I think we need though is just clarification, because once again, they obviously have the player base in mind making this Soul Ash cap change, but we're not really sure what's going on. I would assume that we either get number one, PTR within 3 weeks from now. It's basically April at this point, April 1st, or we get some kind of clarification from Blizzard saying, hey, we're behind and PTR is going to be up in May. That sounds a bit later than I would assume, but once again, at this point, we really don't know. I think BlizzCon was sort of just, hey, this sounds really cool, and we didn't learn much else. So hopefully we find out something in the next few weeks, but I think realistically, August, September is a bit late. I think July is probably the sweet spot for the patch release. And June, looking at how things are, I guess, shaking out at this point, with TBC launching last week and getting one patch per week for that, June does seem a bit optimistic at this point. I concur. I would agree with that. I guess one of the good things about being in patch 9.0.5 for a while is the fact that you can technically push all the covenants to renown 40 if you want. If you're trying to raid in the higher end or have your character as prepped as possible for PTR to hit and the 9.1 to come out, having all of them at 40 for covenant tuning, conduit tuning, whatever that brings, means that it will shave off a decent bit of work heading into 9.1 if that swap is indeed, I guess, needed to be made for your class and spec. At the same time, you can still go into the maw and farm sockets for legendaries or helms or random pieces of gear that you wear with different legendary sets to save yourself some time in 9.1. The actual socket and conduit currency, Stygia, it's changing in 9.1. We know that. Soul Ash, I would imagine, is changing in 9.1, but we don't know that. The thing is, you can still use your time now with the current Stygia we have to put a socket on legendaries on pieces of gear. But then again, I wouldn't fault you if you don't want to go into the maw at this point, because let's be real, we've been in it for 3 months and we have 3 months left ahead of us in the maw. The big things that I think need to change though, not even just for 9.1, but I mean, in 9.0.5 and moving forward for this expansion, covenant swapping. Not just that, covenant abilities, conduit energy. Soul Ash we already touched on a bit, but thinking back to beta, I don't know if you guys remember this, conduits were supposed to be destroyed on use. There was no table of conduits that said that you had all these slots in. If one dropped and you socketed it in a sense, great, you had the power. If you changed to a different spec and moved that conduit out, it was gone. You had to get it again. It was a terrible, terrible design. It felt miserable. And there was an incredible amount of feedback given on that, which is what spawned conduit energy. Now, conduit energy feels similar to that, much more forgiving, but it still feels bad. When they first talked about conduits being destroyed upon, I guess, resocketing or use or whatever you want to call it, the first thing that popped into my head was, why are you limiting your player base based on what they can do? Why would you want to limit a warlock, or let's say a druid who's a guardian, but who wants to play Boomkin in their raid, or who wants to go heal the keys with their friends on the weekend, or who wants to play Feral? I don't know why you'd want to, but who wants to play Feral? Why would you want to limit your player base to what spec they can and can't play? It's literally like a cardinal sin. It's like the one thing you don't do in gaming. You don't limit your player base as what they can do. Why would you want to do that? They just won't play the game. They're not going to level 2, 3, 4 characters. They're just not going to play the game. And we're seeing that now with conduit energy. You see people all the time talking, I see at least on Twitter, in game, on forums and Discord, saying, hey, I'd love to play Demonology Keys this week. You know, Desher looks fun. I'd like to play Marksman. Let's play BM. Why not play Survival? Oh, but I can't, because I have no conduit energy and I got to raid in 4 days. And I got to change conduits in this boss and this boss. I don't get, I know that Shadowlands is about, you know, choice matters. You choose your covenant, you have that covenant ability, and that's what you go with. You choose one of the 4 zones. You're a defender, you're an epic fighter of that zone, and that's great. Choice matters, allegiance matters, but gaming has changed. Covenants were a thing, I feel, in BC or in Wrath. If we went back 10, 12 years in the past, I don't think there'd be any complaints. I don't think so. The game was very different then. When I stopped playing in Cataclysm, when I graduated high school, I hate to say that because it's scary, but it was a lot long ago. When I stopped playing in Cata, the game had made a big shift coming out of WoD into Cata. And when I came back towards the end of MoP, the game had changed. It was a completely different game. It's a good game, but it is not the game that I played in BC and Wrath. And this is not a boomer thing. This is just a, I'm gonna hear that in the comment section. This is just a thing that it's just different. I don't know why you'd fundamentally want to limit your players as to what they can do. Gaming has changed. Look at the MDI. Look at boosting now. You have Discords boosting people through whatever they want. You can go find anything you want in game for sale that night through one of 8,000 boosting communities for gold only. You have the Race the World First being covered by a handful of organizations now. Complexity Limit. You got so many things that the MDI. You got the AWC. They're actual esports events now that you never had in the past. And yet you have a game which limiting their players as to what they can do. People see this new build in the MDI. They want to go play it. But, oh, I don't have the Conduit energy. Let's wait a week. Nah, they just lose interest. They just don't play anymore. Oh, that Warrior's destroying it in AWC. Let's go play it. Oh, but I can't change because I'm tanking for raid in 2 days. Let's go play it. And they just never play. They just stop playing. They cancel their sub. I don't understand why you'd want to limit your players as to what they can do. I don't want this to be misconstrued as I am angry at the game or developers. It's not. I'm passionate about the game because I enjoy it, but it's one of the biggest frustrations to me in Shadowlands. It's like, I want to go do keys on the weekend. It's a different spec, but I can't. Or I can do it, but I have to play a subpar soulbind. So it's like I'm driving a Ferrari with Toyota Corolla tires. It doesn't make any sense. It's just fundamentally flawed. I don't get that design ideology. I don't understand it. So, like, the biggest thing, I think Conduit energy just needs to go. I think you'd see a large spike, legitimately, in returning players, people who would be more engaged in the game, but they just don't play anymore because they can't play the spec they want. They can't test this new build. I know making videos, playing Demo or Destro or AF, new legendaries. I want to play different conduits, but I can't. I just don't do them. Like, I just don't play the game. And I have like 7-8 conduits laying around most of the time. I just don't play as much anymore. But that's the big thing there. I just really hope, number one, that covenant swapping is addressed at some point, but I guess the simplest solution to that is just leveling them all to 40. The big thing is Conduit energy. It really needs to be removed from the game. Shadowlands has still a lot of potential. People cite Legion as like one of the best expansions Blizzard ever made, and I think it was very, very good. But do you guys remember how Legion was at the start? It was bad. Like, I mean, it wasn't bad, but there were a lot of issues. But in 8.1 or whatever, a lot of changes were made based around player feedback and things, and it became one of their best expansions ever. Shadowlands could very, very, very well be that. But with these limiting systems in play, it's rough. Even the Great Vault, for example, similar to how the chest was in BFA and Legion, even the Great Vault at this point is not as rewarding or as exciting. Now, yes, it gives you so many options, but at what cost? Because we lost... This is not just from the Great Vault, but we lost, I mean, less items drop in raid, less items drop in plus, lower eye level drops in plus. We also lost bonus rolls. Now, I think losing bonus rolls is low key, not talked about enough. Yes, 3 coins a week was excessive. Holding 7 coins, having 3 being able to purchase heading into the next raid tier was way too much. But even having 1 bonus roll coin around right now per week with a limit of like 2 would be insane. It would make the game feel so much more rewarding, engaging. It would keep people wanting to play the game, keep people want to raid more. It would just be great. Now, I mean, it's not going to make or break things, but it's a little bit a sense of what used to be, and what, at least for me personally, kept me a tiny bit more excited about raiding. Okay, this piece didn't drop, but technically I can coin the boss and try and get this. But if this piece drops here, I can save my coin for this boss. The little min-maxing of trying to coin what boss and figure out what's what was what I really enjoyed. What I really think would be cool is, instead of the Great Vault giving Stygia if you don't get an item that you don't want or whatever, I've taken Stygia, I think 3 or 4 weeks now. Not in a row, just in general. Give a bonus roll coin. Don't have a vendor in game, but give a bonus roll coin. Why not? It's not a guaranteed piece of gear. It's a chance at a piece of gear. You can go into a raid and target a boss you want and have a chance of getting that gear. If you don't get it, okay, that's unfortunate. You get some anima instead. You get something else just from the coin. You get some gold. But there's that. Or, because of Valor being upgradable as far as PvE Mythic Plus here goes, to 220 max eye level, but 226 being the highest in game instead of like last two bosses, why not give a token or an item that actually lets you upgrade this piece of gear? For example, let's say a ruby drops in Theater of Pain for me. I can upgrade it to 220 eye level. But what if I had a token from the Great Vault that I got from skipping all my loot that week, taking the token at the bottom in place of Stygia that allowed me to push it to 226, the last 6 eye levels? The Great Vault's a great idea, but I would like to see that part changed, elaborated a little bit more, moving in the 9.0, or I guess 9.1 at this point. Small little tweaks here and there can really help Shadowlands and make it a much more enjoyable experience for everyone, I feel. I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit here, and this is not something that's like as cut and dry, this is more, I guess, speculative. Looking back at Legion and even BFA, we were in X.1, and I think we had 0.1, 0.5, or 0.2 on PTR at this point. We're probably going to be in 9.0 for about 7 months. The interesting thing, though, is that we had BlizzCon a couple months ago. I believe it was late January, early February. This year's BlizzCon, talking 2021, this year's BlizzCon is supposed to be an expansion year, because Blizzard always goes expansion, non-expansion, expansion, non-expansion. Now, they can change that on a whim. They can say, okay, yeah, well, you know, we do 2 years, no expansion, depending on the actual slating of patches and things. But I'm really curious as to what their plan's going to be. I was talking about this on stream earlier, I guess, yesterday. I'm wondering if we're in store for another Warlords of Draenor, where they just trim an entire patch out of Shadowlands. The question, I think, is, Blizzard has teams that work on multiple things at once. There are teams working on the next expansion right now, not like, you know, raid development and all that kind of stuff, maybe initial planning, but there's the storyline that's being laid out, and there's probably a handful of ways it can go. But the question is, what is Blizzard going to do about BlizzCon this year? Number one, as much as I'd love it to be IRL, it's probably not going to be because of COVID and things. That's just the way it is. Not much we can really do about that, obviously. I would love a world without COVID, but it is what it is. I'm wondering if there's going to be one in October, like a virtual BlizzCon, or if they actually wait until next year, like 2022, to try for an IRL BlizzCon or have another virtual one. That, number one, gives them more time to get through patch 9.1, maybe talk about 9.2 a little bit. Let's say, for example, 9.1 hits in, like, let's say end of July. Just be a little, you know, negative here. End of July. We get the raid in August. September, October, November, 3 months of the raid, give or take. December, roughly, we start hearing about 9.2. 9.2 is maybe out in like PTR's out in like December, November-ish. And like we look at like January, February for a 9.2 launch, which brings the third raid. But the question is there going to be a 9.3? Was there supposed to be a 9.3? There could be. You know, this is super speculative, but if Blizzard pushed BlizzCon to, let's say, next January, next February, that very well might give them enough time to get 9.2 out, and then maybe flesh out 9.3 a little bit, talk about next expansion, where the storyline is going. But if their plan is to have one this October, I'm curious, are we going to get a WOD again? I'm not talking about being in HFC for a year and a half or whatever. I mean, we might be, but I'm saying, are we going to trim? Are they going to trim a whole patch? How can they even do that with Shadowlands storyline? I'm sure it's possible, and I guess in the end we don't really know where it's going, but at the same time we sort of were under the impression that the final raid was going to be in the Maw, and then at BlizzCon they were like, hey, 9.1, the raid's in the Maw, Sylvanas is there, we're fighting Sylvanas. I'm wondering if Blizzard saw ahead of time that, wow, we're behind and this is going to be tough. I'm really wondering if they just trimmed the patch or are debating trimming a patch. We're going into the Maw to fight Sylvanas in 9.1 from what they said. Now, once again, that could just be part of the storyline, and they could just change things from the way that, you know, beta went and all that stuff. But I'm really wondering if they either already trimmed a patch or are debating trimming one and trying to stay on the development schedule that they have. Because, I mean, who knows what they want to do, but obviously Blizzard's not happy with being able to push things back, or having to push things back. You know, people can cite that it's COVID, it's not COVID, I'm not getting into that. But no game development company is going to be happy they're pushing the game back. But look at all the pushbacks. It's not just that, it's Cyberpunk. It's a million different games that are coming out this year. They've all been pushed back. But the question is, what's the timetable they have? Are they under a set deadline to get, you know, 10.0, the new expansion talked about, released like, you know, end of 2022-ish? How does that put them on track, or how far off track are they with 9.1? That's like the biggest question I think that we need to find out, or I guess I'd like to find out. You know, I would assume if we don't have 9.1 PTR within 3-ish weeks here, we probably get some transparency kind of post from Blizzard, a blue post saying, hey, we're behind, this will be out soon, stay tuned. But I'm really wondering, with the large shift in the storyline from what we saw and heard about the mobbing, the final raid, going right to the jailer himself, if things are shifting to be a 3 raid expansion like we had in WoD versus a 4, I wonder. Now, like I said, I think Shadowlands is, for the most part, been a pretty good expansion from launch. At this point, if we hadn't had COVID, I would assume we'd be in 9.1 right now. A lot of these systems and things would probably be more fleshed out. We probably would have some changes at this point. So I really can't be that critical or crucial of Shadowlands. Yes, at this current point in time, there could be more things done to help their player base, to make things a little more engaging and exciting. But who knows where they are development-wise. Either way, I'm just curious to see what happens, because I enjoy this game. I don't want this video to be taken as me hating the game or, you know, being angry at Blizzard. I'm not at all. I enjoy the game. I'm passionate about the game. I'm sitting in my living room, I guess my second room, at 4:30 in the morning, talking for half an hour, about an hour at this point, about an expansion we've been in for 4 months. I want the game to be good, so I don't want this video being misconstrued in any way, shape, or form. It's just that I don't know where things are going, and quite frankly, I'm not scared. I'm curious as to what's going on. But with all that being said, yes, if 9.1 does come out in July, it doesn't mean we're not getting any content until July. We'll have 9.1 on PTR, I would assume, in the latest a month. So you're going to be finding out about class tuning. There's going to be buffs and nerfs to classes, new conduits, I would assume new legendaries, new ranks, new soul ash, I guess ways to acquire soul ash, new legendaries in themselves, maybe double legendaries. I believe they mentioned tier gear is coming out in 9.2 as their plan. Who knows? There's going to be raid testing, a new zone to test. You're going to be able to see all these things coming out on PTR, and PTR is free. You can get on and play it yourself and test these bosses yourself. So it's not like we're going to have zero content until July. I think a lot of people are missing that, but if they're talking about just retail content, then yeah, we might have to, you know, be in it for the long haul. But let me know what you guys think about this video and your thoughts in general. Feel free to drop them below in the comment section. Once again, keep in mind, I don't work for Blizzard. I just enjoy the game. So don't shoot the messenger. I'm just talking about my thoughts about 9.0.5 and hopefully the bright future of Shadowlands itself. If you guys have any questions, also feel free to drop them down there. I'll be sure to get back to you. If you guys want to talk about it more or just swing by and hang out anytime, feel free to come by stream. There's a link down to it down below. Also, I'm more than happy to discuss it there as well. If you guys want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons below. Helps out a lot. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon. Peace.